خوب تماشا کن شهر ما رو سیاحت کن قصه داری فراموش کن قصه ما رو گوش کن.
Welcome to the France 24 debate. I'm Nadia Massi. Tonight, is there a war on girls' education in Iran? Since November, over 1,000 school children have apparently been poisoned by toxic gases in their classrooms. And it seems the attacks are on the rise. An investigation by France 24's Observers team shows 26 schools were targeted this Wednesday. That's the highest figure in a single day. Now, it's not known who's behind the poisonings or indeed why they're doing it, but what is clear is the impact. Girls are struggling to breathe, fatigued and nauseous. Many are ending up in hospital.
Smell. I started having a headache and my nose began to sting.
There was a smell of gas. All of a sudden everything went black in front of me. I became really dizzy.
I feel pain in my chest and when I walk my legs shake a little.
When I stand up I feel dizzy and my entire body feels very numb and this doesn't allow me to walk.
That just a few of the girls who've been affected. And to discuss what is going on, I'm pleased to be joined from London by the researcher Azadeh Porzand. Also in London is Tara Kangalu, who's the author of The Heartbeat of Iran. And with me here in the studio is the sociologist Azadeh Kian. Welcome to you. Thanks for joining us. Live in Tehran as well is our correspondent Reza Saya. We'll come to you all in a moment. But first of all, let's have a look at the latest images we have from Iran, which have been compiled by my colleague Brian Quinn.
At this girls' school in Tehran, a crowd of furious parents, their anger triggered by what appear to be yet more aerosol poisonings at 3 girls' schools in the capital. In the city of Ardabil, a similar scene as 7 all-female schools were targeted. Iranian media report more than 100 students were hospitalized Wednesday, mostly with respiratory ailments. 800 students across the country have reportedly been poisoned while at school in recent months. The first cases were reported in the holy city of Qom in late November.
Look at my child. She can't feel her legs, even when I pinch them. She feels nothing. She can't breathe. Don't send your children to school.
Earlier this week, Iran's deputy foreign minister insisted poisoning reports were exaggerated, part of a psychological war led by a hostile media. By Wednesday, though, with public concern mounting, President Ebrahim Raisi had ordered an official investigation. But after months of violent crackdown on a protest movement sparked by the death of a young woman in the custody of the country's notorious morality police last September, public confidence is at an ebb.
The Iranian people's trust in authority is perhaps at its lowest. People are suffering financially, economically, emotionally. At its core, there's no transparency, there's no credibility, and there's no accountability.
Some Iranians suspect the poisonings are being carried out by religious hardliners trying to prevent girls from going to school. Others, though, fear official retaliation for strong female participation in the months-long protest movement.
Well, let's go live now to Tehran. Reza Saya, our correspondent, is standing by. And Reza, as we saw in that report, apparently there have been new poisonings this week. What can you tell us?
Yeah, new poisonings this week. The anger is growing, the frustration is growing, a lot of unanswered questions, obviously a lot of uncertainty. What we can tell you with certainty is that ever since December of last year, hundreds of schoolgirls have reported feeling sick, nauseous during school hours. Many have been taken to the hospital, treated, and released. And again, what we can say with certainty is these incidents continue to keep happening in numerous cities, at least 5 cities throughout Iran. Obviously, first and foremost, parents of these children are deeply concerned. Some are demanding answers. Some are reportedly keeping their kids from going to school. And of course, this is happening all against the backdrop of the recent anti-government protests that were sparked last September with the death of Mahsa Amini, who died in the custody of authorities after reportedly being arrested for not abiding by the Islamic dress code. Her death sparked months-long anti-government protests. The government responded with a crackdown, hundreds of people killed, thousands of people arrested. The street protests, the public protests have seemingly ended. But obviously, there's a lot of frustration and anger that's lingering, that's being expressed online. And that brings the big question. Are these incidents where these schoolgirls are being poisoned in school related in any way to these anti-government protests? And with that question, you have speculation that's running rampant. Speculation from individuals and groups, many of whom have agendas. You have critics of the government saying, obviously, this is connected to the anti-government protests. The government is taking revenge. You have supporters of the government saying, obviously, they're not connected to the protests, and this is another foreign plot by a foreign enemy. And as a journalist, when you have this kind of speculation, it makes reporting on something serious like this with accuracy very difficult. If you want to report with accuracy, you need facts, you need to double verify facts, you need authoritative sources, credible sources, and you have very few of those elements present at this moment. And that makes it very difficult to report with certainty what exactly is happening with this.
Reza, perhaps the one thing you can tell us with some certainty is at least what the government is saying for now. What's the government's response been?
Yeah, I've reported from Iran for a very long time. So I have a good sense when the government officials are trying to hide something, to cover up something, and when they're not. My sense is that they're confused too. They're trying to get a handle on this. They want to figure out what's happening. They don't want negative headlines again in international media. So they say they've started an investigation. President Raisi has charged the Interior Ministry with finding out what's happening. One official last week came out and made a statement that he said someone's trying to end girls' education here. And that led to a lot of headlines. For those who are not familiar with Iran, I think it's important to point out that there's never been a movement here against girls' education. In fact, the government here, the culture here stresses and values girls' education very much. Half of women here are college graduates, and that's a sign of a society that stresses girls' education. Human rights, women's rights is another issue, but that adds to the mystery and the confusion. What is happening? Is this someone behind this? Or is this an industrial accident? If it is an industrial accident, how come it's happening in such a widespread area? Lots of questions, very few answers.
Lots of questions indeed, Reza. We'll try to bring some of those to our panellists on the debate. For now, though, Reza Sayar live in Tehran. Thank you. Well, let's bring in Azadeh Kian, who is listening to all of that. And can I just first of all get your reaction when you first started hearing about these poisonings? Were you shocked by the images?
Well, of course it is shocking, but one should not forget that this started end of November, and the government of Iran had enough time to investigate. They didn't do anything serious. They waited until now, when over 1,000 schoolgirls have been injured by this mysterious gas attack. First of all, this chemical gas, is not available to everyone. And second of all, we have the tradition of this vigilantist groups who are extremists, very close to some extremist ayatollahs who have, for instance, also committed this type of actions against women in the past. For instance, in 2014, when they threw acids to some women in Isfahan, and then 4 of them, and nothing happened, although they complained, but basically nothing happened. And even this time, state authorities are saying, we don't know where this attack came from, who did it, and so on and so forth. In a country where if you just unveil in the street, the next day you're arrested, how come, they don't know who is orchestrating these attacks throughout the country. So, of course, it is coming from their own hardliners to begin with. Second of all, the Iranian society valorize education and women's education, which goes back to the beginning of the 20th century. But extremists, again, tried to, for instance, impede girls to get to universities. They or even imposed a quota in favor of men and so on. So if girls and women are very active and present at universities and schools, it is because it is the society's culture, not the government. I just would like to add that the Raisi government, to me, shows the Talibanization of Iranian power, and to me, these attacks are part of this Talibanization, because when you look at what Taliban did some years ago in Afghanistan, they basically did the same thing. They attacked girls' schools in order to impede girls getting to education. Talibanization
is a big claim. We'll talk about it a little bit later on, I think, but I want to bring in some of our other guests at this point. Tara Kangalu joins us from London live. Thanks for being on the programme. I understand you've been in touch with somebody, a friend of yours, whose daughter is one of the victims. She was poisoned. Can you tell us just a little bit about what happened to this one girl?
Absolutely. I've actually been in touch with quite a few folks, both families who've been affected by this, but also physicians. And I'm happy to tell you more about some of what the doctors are saying about the cases, which I think is quite telling about the gravity of the situation on the ground. So someone I spoke with, actually a friend, her daughter has came home with some poisoning symptoms a few days ago, and she's been ill for 2 days. She actually, this is the interesting part, that she goes to a private school in Tehran, a very affluent neighborhood where the school is actually an international school. There's also boys attending school. This child is an elementary student. And, she came home sick with feelings of nausea and headache and respiratory issues. And it wasn't just her. Her teachers and classmates were also sick. So, that has been the case. And the child, of course, is feeling better now. But I think the point here is, because so many folks are talking about cities like Qom or, Adabil, Lorestan, and so forth, and of course a few in Tehran. But the point here is that it's also affecting not just conservative communities. Places like this neighborhood, for instance, in Tehran has also been affected, which I think is quite telling of how widespread this is and how potentially it can be.
Well, let me bring in Azadeh Porzand on that, if I can, who's also joining us now live from London. I mean, what was your initial reaction when you started hearing this story, and what's your thoughts on what we've just been hearing, that this is affecting girls in religious cities like Qom and also in the capital, Tehran?
Yes, thank you for having me. I wholeheartedly agree with much of what both of your panelists have said so far. My reaction as a human rights researcher following Iran's violations of human rights for years, and as somebody who was a survivor of their systematic violations, was sort of twofold. One was that I'm not surprised that such a thing is happening with this level of gravity, under the rule of the Islamic Republic and or intentionally by the Islamic Republic's regime. But at the same time, the nature of this, in my opinion, systematic pattern of abuse is rather new, at least to me. So it really took me a while to wrap my head around the details and the circumstances around it. As human rights organizations are starting to make sense of the situation, there seems to be more and more the likelihood of the Islamic Republic's regime being behind really these attacks, and if not, certainly benefiting from these attacks as an intimidation technique against a part of the population and their families that clearly collectively took part in the protest of women's life freedom. And so, as your correspondent said, we still are trying to figure out the details. And in my opinion, the Islamic Republic knows very well what is happening and is simply, as usual, using its propaganda machine and its press in order to further convolute the situation, complicate the situation, hoping that this confusion will actually create fear among the families, and hoping that they can blame, some other elements. They claim that there are some Shia extreme elements involved. What is, for me, ironic is that the Islamic Republic is a radical Shia group with a jurisdiction. So I'm not really sure what exactly they are trying to point at here.
Well, let's see if we can listen to the reaction from a government spokesperson. This is the Deputy Interior Minister. He was speaking yesterday. Let's take a listen.
Over 90% of this is caused by stress, rumors, and psychological war, started particularly by hostile TV channels to create a troubled and stressful situation for students and their parents. Their goal was to force schools to close. Thank God, we have no worrying case in the country. In Tehran, we have not had any case of students being poisoned.
So, Azadeh Kian, he says that, first of all, he blames the media, doesn't he? He says that the hostile media is whipping this up. And then he says there have been no cases in Iran. We just heard from one of our other panelists that indeed there are cases in Tehran. So what do you make of the government's response now? I mean, I'm sure you're frustrated by it, but what do you think their logic is?
Well, this is not the first time. Every time these vigilantes and hardliners who are very close to the government and work with the government and work with, as I mentioned, and they say that they are very close to the leader, actually. And they are there and they are acting because the leader is very frustrated by women who do not respect Islamic precepts, by these youngest who participated in the revolutionary demonstrations and so on and so forth. So once again, these officials are trying to put the responsibility on either foreigners or foreign media or some opponents inside the country and so on, not taking the responsibility for it and not doing anything seriously to, for instance, get hold of who is attacking students. And besides, who is benefiting actually from this? Once again, they are kind of creating a very hard situation for families and for youngsters. So, so that next time, if they want to take part in a demonstration or if they want to show their discontent, they think they have to be careful because something very, very harsh is going to happen to them. So these are all intimidation processes. These are all intimidation acts, and they are being supported by Iranian officials, as this deputy minister said.
But just briefly, I mean, do you think the goal here is to try and stop girls going to school altogether? As you have said earlier, there is this real culture of education for girls in Iran. They're more Iranian women go to university than Iranian men. So does that really fit that the regime would be trying to curtail girls studying now?
Well, absolutely, because to me this is a part of what I call Talibanization of power. For instance, they have tried to, for instance, impede women from getting to the job market. We know that they are putting pressure on women, including all those graduates, women from universities, to get to the job market. They are saying that women should be mothers and wives, that each woman should have 4 or 5 children. And all the public policy under the current government is targeting women, but only as housewives and childbirths, and so I do believe that this attack against girls' schools is to intimidate them, first of all, and also it is a revenge, of course, because a lot of these students did take part either directly or indirectly in the demonstrations recently, and also to kind of, to intimidate them and eventually impede their access, at least free access to school. And we have seen that for the past several weeks, there are parents who are now saying, I prefer my child to stay at home.
So it's working, actually.
It is working because people are really very angry but very frustrated at the same time. No serious response is coming from the government. So parents are saying, why should I send my girl to school? Because she won't be in security at school. So, and they are asking for online education now.
Okay, well, let me bring in Azadeh Prozan on that if I can, because I think something that's really important to try and pin down, if we can, is actually who we're talking about, who we think is poisoning these girls. There's been a suggestion that perhaps it's not the government directly, but it's perhaps hardliners associated with the government. I mean, in practical terms, what does that mean? Who are we talking about here?
Well, yeah, in a situation where the information is being withheld from the Iranian public by the Iranian authorities, as usual, it's really difficult to, have a definitive answer to this question. But I believe that, seconding what Dr. Kian just said, the point here, in my opinion, at this moment is not so much who exactly is doing these attacks, because either the Islamic Republic officially, but in a clandestine way, is doing so for intimidation and punishment purposes, and or is facilitating, other radical groups affiliated with them in order to launch these attacks, and has closed an eye on this situation for months already, which only escalated in recent days. So the point here is the fact that the Islamic Republic has proven over and over again to be anything but a transparent government, and also structurally it is incapable of being able to independently investigate any human rights violations and any crimes that take place. And at the same time, also has proven that is unwilling to do so. I believe that this is a way for them, hoping that it will prevent more protests to happen, and to sort of pacify a part of the population that has shown to have the will to be on the streets despite their young age. And also, let's not forget that even if education is something that they have received applauses from the international community over the years, this regime does not shy away from reversing its even progressive policies. They were once upon a time, quite progressive on family planning, and when they decided it's not to their benefit, they are now one of the most backward countries when it comes to family planning, going as far as criminalizing birth control and contraception. So they do what they think that's best for them, and they continue to benefit from the lack of culture of the lack of accountability and absolute impunity that they have created for themselves over the years.
Okay, I want to bring in now. I want you to listen rather to a doctor who spoke to the Guardian newspaper. They're a specialist in the treatment of poisoning victims. Let's take a listen to what they had to say on this.
With the data that's available, the most probable cause for this poisoning could be a weak organophosphate agent. Even if some of the poisoned pupils show a sign of severe sweating, excess salivation, vomiting, intestinal hypermotility, and diarrhea, then the attack was done using this agent.
And Tara, can Galu, I play that soundbite because you said you have yourself spoken to a number of medics who've also been treating girls who were poisoned. Does that echo what you were hearing from them? And do we know what the chemical is? Because there's been some suggestion it's a chemical that's available widely in shops and that anybody could go out and buy it. Do you have a sense?
I think there's a lot of speculation on, the kind of chemical, the kind of gas that has been used. But I think the bottom line is that this should not happen. This should not be the case. And I just want to add one quick thing before I start talking about what I've been hearing from physicians on the ground. And that is, the Iranian government has known about this for months. The first cases were public in November. So there were many opportunities to stopping this disaster from continuing, but certainly there wasn't. And so I just wanted to add that to the conversation, to just echo the fact that there's absolutely no transparency, no accountability, and also no credibility. The government has zero credibility in the eyes of the people, and there's absolutely no trust. As far as the gas goes, again, there's a lot of speculations. One of the physicians I've spoken to, she works in a public hospital in the city of Ardabil in the northwest of Iran. And yesterday she told me that there were almost 300 students from 11 schools, also including boys, who came to her hospital. And they had to essentially end up using all the units in that hospital because so many were having respiratory issues. And I spoke with her earlier in the day, and she told me that the majority of the students have been dismissed. However, she was in an overnight shift, and then she told me that so many of these students are coming back. They're coming back with muscular pain. And again, this is a city where they don't have the resources that, let's say, hospitals, both public and private, have in Iran. In Tehran, and so they didn't have the kits to do the preliminary testing to see, okay, what sort of agents have been used. But what she emphasized is that almost all of the students who have returned are showing muscular pain, and that is a symptom of some sort of neurological event happening in the body, and they have sent scans and MRIs and so forth. So the point here is it's more complicated than what we know, but the bottom line is there's absolutely no transparency, and nothing that comes out of any spokesperson from the government is based on facts and truth, as we've seen over and over again, whether it was with the death of Mahsa Amini almost 6 months ago, or the Ukrainian plane crash. So again, I think we have to see, but the fact that this is happening to some of the most vibrant and innocent members of the Iranian society is just appalling.
And Azadeh Porzand, I mean, clearly from what you're all saying, trust in the Iranian government is extremely low indeed. That said, the Prosecutor General has announced a criminal investigation is being opened here. Doesn't that give you some hope that they're going to try and investigate what's going on? I mean, that's a step in the right direction. They're not denying this is happening altogether, are they?
Absolutely not. The general prosecutor is itself a source of repression and a participant of the repression that the world has seen in Iran in the past 6 months, and we have seen in the past many decades. This regime simply does not have neither the credibility, nor the willingness, nor the structure, the judiciary or the parliament, or any of its organs are set up independently enough from the supreme leader and from the whole apparatus of the regime in order to be able to claim, even remotely, to be able to do independent investigation. As a result, those of us who work as human rights researchers and advocates we have resorted to international means and the international community to understand, endorse, and accept that the Islamic Republic is incapable of holding itself accountable domestically. And therefore, we really need, to ask for and call on the international community to conduct independent investigations, such as what we will hopefully soon see with the UN fact-finding mission that is about to start its work and investigation on what happened during the Women Life protests. And I really hope that this pattern of incidents can be included in their investigation, especially because their mandate is on the situation of women and girls and children, and it seems quite on par with what's happening in today's Iran with the schools and the gas poisonings.
And Azadeh Kian, just picking up on what was said there, how do you think the international community has been responding so far to those images we've been looking at out of Iran? You're obviously, like me, based here in France. Is the French government doing enough? Are they saying enough?
Absolutely not. Europe is not doing anything whatsoever. The United States either, because they are trying they're focusing on the nuclear issue, uranium enrichment, and we know that the Iranian government is using uranium enrichment to take the focus or the attention of the international community to this, because they want to resume nuclear talks and so on. And so Europeans are being very, very, very timid. And although they say they support Iranian revolution, Iranian women in particular, but they are not doing anything very seriously, really seriously, against the regime. I'm not talking about toppling the regime, it's not their job, but at least, seriously condemning the Islamic regime, pushing forward for instance, fact-finding missions and so on. Basically, I think that many Iranians, including myself, are absolutely frustrated by Europeans and the way they deal with this repressive, corrupt regime.
Tara Gangalu in London, do you share that frustration with the international community, particularly, I suppose, the UK government where you're based?
Absolutely. I don't think there's any Iranian, except perhaps those who work with the regime or benefit from their existence, that contradicts that sentiment. There's absolutely no accountability. I mean, the Iranian foreign minister was speaking at the UN Human Rights Council, the same venue that just months ago it was kicked out of the Commission on Women's Rights. And so I think there's a huge contradiction right there, just blatantly, that we literally saw in the last 48 hours. Europe, UK, and the United States cannot say one thing, but in reality do something else. On one hand condemned, but on the other hand shake hands with the folks who are propagators and instigators of some of the most vile and brutal attacks on their own citizens. And again, over and over again, we are seeing the government's perpetual disregard for the well-being of its citizens and Iranian. And I also want to echo some of the sentiments that we said, because we are, leading into the Women's History Month. International Women's Day is ahead of us. And I want to share that, Iranian women inside Iran, against all odds, are some of the most progressive, vibrant, educated, demographics and populations, not just in that region, but the entire world. And they absolutely deserve the opportunity to meet their potential and not being robbed from every single right that they have, as is the case right now.
And it's worth emphasising, as we're having this conversation today, that in 2 weeks' time it will be 6 months since the death of Mahsa Amini in police custody. Her death, of course, sparking that huge wave of unrest. Azadeh Porzand, Reza Sayar, our correspondent in Iran, was saying there are far fewer people out in the streets than there were just a couple of weeks ago. What's happened to the protest movement?
Yes, I believe personally. I believe that while we don't see protests like in large numbers in the streets anymore, which is natural due to the heavily repressive techniques of the Islamic Republic against the protesters. As I think evident in all the points that came out in this panel, the frustration, the grievances, and really the anger among in the Iranian society has gone nowhere, and I believe that it's only a matter of time that we see yet another round of protests, that we see some kind of again mass level and nationwide level protests. But when you follow Iran closely, you do see that different associations of workers and different groups of Iranian citizens, especially in some of the most persecuted areas of the country, most marginalized parts of the country, such as Baluchistan or Kurdistan, grievances and local level protests continue, and so does the lethal repression of the Islamic Republic. So I think the Islamic Republic at this point is hoping for some extra time for survival, using all of its force and its violence. But there is no question that, in my opinion, the society is not going to go back to September 15th, 2022. Even though even before Mahsa Amini's death, the society was filled with grievances, whether they were socioeconomic or civic and political. But something happened after this movement that I personally believe that no matter what the Islamic Republic does, it cannot contain the aspirations, the demands, the grievances, and the frustration of the Iranian people at this point.
Azadeh Kian, do you agree with that? I mean, you've been a very vocal campaigner for women's rights in Iran for decades now. How do you view this moment, not just the poisonings in the school we're talking about, but 6 months after Mahsa Amini's death? Do you think the protest movement is dying out, or do you have some optimism that it lives on?
Absolutely not. I'm very, very optimistic, and I do agree with Azadeh Pourzand when she says that for the moment, we don't see much demonstrations in the street. It doesn't mean that people are satisfied with what they get from the government. The government has no response to the demands of the Iranians. Women, life, freedom, actually, the major slogan that was chanted during these demonstrations really says a lot about what people are demanding. Equality, the right to live as people want, and also liberty, also freedom, independence, and so on and so forth. And this government and this state and this regime are incapable of course, responding to these demands. Now, what I do believe is that the Iranian regime, the Islamic regime, has been fragilized, is very weak, has been weakened, and the protests continue, but in different shapes and forms. The best way to support the Iranians is not to negotiate with this regime, not to recognize this regime and believe in the Iranian society, because as other panelists mentioned, what is going on is really crucial. I've been, working on this Iranian society for the past many decades, but I do believe that what's going on today and these ongoing revolution is the most crucial social movement that Iran has ever witnessed during the past 45 years or so. And I'm pretty sure that the regime is really, really weak, and if they are now attacking school children, it is a very good sign of their weakening. And so Europe and Western democracies should really support the Iranian people and not negotiate with the regime on nuclear issues or any other issues, because that would be a very bad signal sent to the Iranians and to their revolution.
Well, and all three of you have expressed your real skepticism with the capacity of the Iranian government, or the willingness of the government to investigate these poisonings, for example, to follow up on what's going on. Now, it has to be said, though, that today the authorities in Iran have apparently arrested 4 people in connection with the assault of a woman outside a girls' school where a poisoning took place. You're looking at the video now. This is a video that went viral on social media. It appears is to show a man assaulting a woman who was not wearing her hijab. You can see the image there. And
do you know who this person is? Sorry.
Go ahead.
This person is a plainclothes person. We call it lebas shakhsi. These are the vigilantes, are very close to conservatives, extremists. And also, he is the brother of a Revolutionary Guard.
Well, isn't it significant then that 4 people have been arrested? Doesn't that give you, like, why would they, if he's so important?
But first of all, being arrested because they were filmed, because they were in a video, and other people have already recognized that person who attacked the mother of the child who had been gassed, and for this very reason, the government all of a sudden recognized these people. But because other people, Iranians, those who were in front of that school, had already videotaped this person and recognized that person. And the fact is that before coming here or seeing what you just showed, I have read these things. We know who this person is, that his brother is a Revolutionary Guard, that himself is a plainclothes vigilante, and so on and so forth. First of all. Second of all, arresting under the pressure of the media, international media, is something. Sentencing that person or hundreds of them to prison or imprisonment is something else. You'll see. I mean, nothing will happen to these people because they work with this regime.
And it is interesting, at least to me, that the woman who was being assaulted there, Tara Gangalu, didn't have her hijab on. She wasn't wearing it. This is a moment, isn't it, in Iran? Fewer women are wearing their hijabs in the streets, and now they're protesting girls getting poisoned at school. Do you draw the connection between those two things?
Again, I think the issue of the hijab is secondary to the main point, which is that this woman, this mother, was even bothered. This is a woman, a mother, who's worried about the most precious person in her life, her child, and she's being assaulted and she's being disrespected at a time where she needs to be supported. She deserves a government and system of operation that supports her, not harass her, not lie to her, and her hijab. Quite frankly, it doesn't even matter if she was not wearing the hijab. But to your point, again, Iranian women are using every single tool in their toolbox to show that they deserve more, and they're not going to abide by the stifling and oppressive system that has governed their lives for decades. And again, I don't think we are going to go back to how things were, and people's grievances long exceeded the September protests that erupted nationwide. These resentments and angers and frustrations have existed long before that, but we're just seeing them coming forth because, quite frankly, people are fed up. They are disillusioned to the levels that they were not before. So again, Iranian people deserve a government that supports them in their grievances, not creating situations where a mother is being even touched or bothered. That mother should have been supported and not harassed like that.
And Azadeh Porzand, I mean, do you echo that, and how much of a link do you draw between the poisonings that we've been talking about today and the protest movement? Is there a clear link for you?
Well, as far as the likelihood of speculations go in a situation of, like I said, evidence being withheld and information being withheld from us, I cannot help but to see a pattern, yes, and I cannot help but to remember, the Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei's, statement a few months ago, saying that the children who have been part of this protest, it's basically based on their naivete, and all they need to get fixed is a little bit of punishment. It's really difficult when you follow Iran on a day-to-day basis to really not see a pattern of abuse here, both against protesters but also against women and girls. And so for me, while, again, as a researcher, I would really like to see, more substantiated evidence to be able to definitively claim something, I still cannot help but to rely on the likelihood that either this is intentional, directly intentional by the Islamic Republic, or indirectly facilitated by the Islamic Republic as a part of its intimidation technique. And also, I don't think that, I think, again, it's a question of precedence. The Islamic Republic's regime has done this time and time again. They kill their citizens. They, for example, in the 90s, we had the chain murdering of intellectuals, and they said, oh, there were the rogue elements of the intelligence service who stabbed people in their homes and killed them extrajudicially. And they made an example of a couple of people from within the system, imprisoned them and all, and that was the end. This is not called investigation, independent investigation, and this is not called accountability. This is simply psychologically, trying to play with the Iranian mindset and ridiculing the concept of accountability and the concept of justice, which is clearly broken in today's Iran.
Azadeh Pozad, thank you very much indeed. We just have a few seconds left. Azadeh Kian, as you're with me in the studio, I just want to get your, in just a few seconds, as we're coming to the end, women, life, freedom. Does it survive as a movement now despite the poisonings?
Absolutely. I mean, you see, it would survive, and it has extended to throughout the country, including in some areas that were not, central up to now. Look at Baluchistan, look at Baluchi women who are now taking part in street demonstrations in Baluchistan. This is absolutely unimaginable to me, because I worked on Baluchistan some years ago, and this shows the extent and importance of what is happening today in Iran, and that, yes, women, life, freedom is a real slogan that everybody is chanting, because everyone wants the end of this regime, and a regime that will correspond better to the realities of the Iranian society and to its youth as well.
All right, we'll leave it with that thought. I want to thank you very much indeed. Azadeh Kian here in the studio, Tara Kangalu in London, and Azadeh Pozan in London as well. Thank you all very much indeed. This has been the France 24 debate. I'm Nadia Massi. Thanks for watching, and good night.
Please share and like. See you next clip.